続いては JP モルガン証券株式会社株式調査部長イエスパー・コール様による基調講演、題して日本経済です。それではイエスパー・コール様ご紹介いたします。 Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Jesper Koll.
Hello. Ohayo gozaimasu. Good morning. Welcome to Tokyo. Tokyo is the only city in Asia with clean air, no traffic jams, and a banker who will lend you 85% loan to value. So welcome to Tokyo. I want to outline, give you some arguments why you are not bullish enough on the outlook for Japan. I know it is easy to be negative. The big negative debate is about Jinko Gensho, is about the population going down. Jesper, how can you be bullish on a country where in 385 years only 28 people will be left? Forget this. Don't worry about what will happen in 300 years. We are entrepreneurs, we are investors, we are business people. What is the reason to be bullish on Japan, and why I think that the Japanese economy can easily grow around 2 to 2.5% over the next 5 to 6 years. So what are the reasons? Put yourself in my position. If I ask you, what is the strongest point about Japan? Why should you put your money, why should you put your clients' money investing in Japan? What is the strongest attribute that this country has that nobody else has? And the answer is simple. Japan is a very, very rich country. This looks at research and development spending as a share in national income. And you see that throughout the 1990s, throughout the early millennium, structurally, Japan has continued to invest in the future. 3.4% research and development spend, and the breadth of this spending is very, very broad, whether it is in electronic devices, whether it is in medical devices, whether it is in car tires. Across the entire spectrum, you find that the intellectual property, the intellectual asset that Japan has is one of the best in the world. Unlocking, monetizing, profiting from this investment is a challenge. But that's what business people, that's what entrepreneurs do. I found it fascinating that a Japanese company, Fujifilm, actually had developed an antidote to the Ebola virus, but nobody had known about it. So unlocking these hidden treasures are the key reason to be optimistic in Japan. There is a wealth of intellectual property, there is a wealth of innovation in Japan. And by the way, it is very interesting. You see, of this 3.4%, in America, half the intellectual property, half the research and development is done by the public sector, by the government. It is basically the military-industrial complex. In Japan, of this research and development, about 80%, 80, is done by private companies. So you and I can actually invest in it and untap it. Now, Japan's relentless focus on perfection, relentless focus on research and development, relentless focus on innovation actually does generate real profits, real comeback opportunity. This is shipbuilding. Shipbuilding. And did you know that last year Japan overtook China and once again became the second largest shipbuilder in the world? And our forecast actually is that this will develop further and that over the next 2 years, Japan is likely to become once again the #1 shipbuilder in the world. Why is this? This is because of relentless focus on research and development. Ships are complicated machines, but effectively you need to be energy efficient and you need to be CO2 efficient. There has been a lot of tightening of rules and regulation to cut the CO2 emissions to make them more ecologically efficient. Japan's companies have invested in this technology, and on our analysis, they can now produce ships that are 30 to 35 times more ecologically friendly and CO2 efficient than any of the competing shipyards in the world. So I just wanted to highlight this. I know that in the media world, people always want to talk about gadgets and they want to talk about IT. That's fine, but in the reality, in the real world, Japan is actually a formidable competitor. Another thing that is interesting is that actually with Abenomics, with the depreciation of the yen, Japan has repriced itself into the global economy. And I just thought this might be of interest to you, a little known fact. If you look at the price of rice, the producer price, because of the 50% depreciation of the yen against the renminbi, you actually find that now Japan's producer rice price is actually cheaper than it is in the People's Republic of China. So trust me, TPP, the whole agricultural deregulation thing, is actually going to happen. Japan is priced back into the global economy. And in my world, in the world of money, in the world of investment, you also find that Japan is cheap. This is the price-earnings multiple, the PE multiple of Japan's Topics Index and the S&P 500. And as you know, Japan used to have a premium. Japan's price-earnings multiple on average was about 25 to 30 times over the last 20 years. Now, this is no longer the case. Japan is reasonably priced. The price-earnings multiple of stocks stands at around 14, 15 times right now. So the good news is for us as investors that despite the hype about Abenomics, despite Governor Kuroda at the Bank of Japan engendering massive stimulus, there is no bubble. The valuations of Japanese stocks are very, very reasonable. And in fact, I do think that there is a genuine discount to Abenomics. So, first message to you. You've got a wealth of intellectual property, a wealth of patents and innovation potential. Japan is very rich. Unlocking that richness is the challenge for business people, for entrepreneurs, and for investors. The good news is that there is no overvaluation in Japan, that Japan still effectively trades at a discount. Now I'm going to do something dangerous. You know, what are the most dangerous words in investment advice. The most dangerous words are, "This time it is different." Very dangerous. Now, I have been stuck in Japan for 30 years. This is my 30th anniversary. And I will tell you that yes, this time it is different. And the reason for this is the following points. I've been here for 30 years. Wow, it's beautiful. On a day like today, that's where you want to be. For 30 years, there have been exactly 2 prime ministers, Koizumi and Nakasone, who were in power for more than 2 years. You cannot run a country like that. If the prime minister, if the government changes every 12 or 15 months, it does not work. There is so much uncertainty that you and I as risk takers, you and I as entrepreneurs, we lose faith in the consistency. I do not care whether you like Prime Minister Abe and his team or not. また後で赤ちょうちんで議論しましょう。The key point is these people will stay in power for at least another 2, possibly 3 more years. There is regime certainty in Japan. And from a policy perspective, these people are pro-business. They are cutting corporate taxes. They do want to create easier regulations for business to be conducted in Japan. Should they be doing this faster? Should this be done more radically? どうぞ赤ちょうちんで議論しましょう。But the key issue is the trend, the consistency, the stability is there for the first time in many, many years, and that is something that is very positive, for us as entrepreneurs, for us as investors. The second thing that is different, and I do not say this lightly, is that Japan now has a national project. The rivalry with the People's Republic of China is now very real. It is clear that the military and defense posture is galvanizing the Japanese elite to take action. Japan does not want to become a colony of the People's Republic of China. Japan wants to be a member of the global club that makes the rules. And Japan knows that to be a credible member, to be part of the global ruling club, you must have an economy that grows. You must have industries that are competitive. You must show that Japan becomes the envy, becomes a role model for the rest of the world. The relationship between Japan and China is a very dense one. In fact, in economic terms, the integration on trade, on capital flows, on people flow between Japan and China already has surpassed the level of integration we had between my country, Germany, and France, or England and America at any point during the last 30 years. So in economic terms, Japan and China are linked at the hip. But this rivalry to be a credible and serious part of global negotiations unifies the decision-making process. And that, I think, again, is very, very important. The other thing, labor shortage, savings shortage. This is good news. Last year, the household savings rate turned negative for the first time in 3 generations. And this is good news for you and I as an investor, because when the savings rate is negative, it means that the pressure to perform is actually increasing. So the changes in the corporate governance code, the Japanese insurance industry, the Japanese pension industry, all of a sudden demanding a rate of return that is driven not by politics, but by economics, by the economics of scarcity, which means that the assets in Japan are forced to sweat harder, are forced to generate higher rates of return. I want to leave you with one final thought, which is the most relevant part for the real estate industry in my view. And my thesis is that Japan will be the only advanced industrial economy where we will see a rise of a new middle class. Let me explain this. Japan's labor shortage is very real. In fact, I want to be reborn as a 23-year-old Japanese girl. And the reason is that the number of high school, the number of university graduates is declining every year by about 200,000 people. And everybody says, wow, that's terrible, Jinko Gensho, we are dying. No, has nothing to do with dying. It is great news. I, as a 23-year-old Japanese boy or girl, my value is going to be increasing. I will be in higher demand. There will be more competition for my talent. And that is good news because the Japanese people are very highly educated, very diligent, and certainly can do this. The bonus is the demographic sweet spot. This is the reality of Japan's labor market. The salaryman lifetime employment is dead. This shows that over the last 20 years, we have seen a big increase in hiseisha, in non-full-time employees. Today, 40%, 40, of the people receiving a paycheck are hiseisha. They are not full-time employees. A big change here. Now that the labor market is tight, what will happen? In fact, what is already beginning to happen is that you are having leading companies rehiring the part-time workers onto a full-time basis. You've had fast retailing do so. Parts of NTT and Hitachi are doing so. This is spreading, and it is driven by economics, by an economics of scarcity, which is very, very good news. Why is this bullish for the real estate market? Well, let me ask you a question. What is the difference between a hiseisha and a seisha in Japan? There are 2 + 1 differences. The first one is money. It is income. Basically, your non-wage benefits, if you become a full-time employee, are about 15%. It varies a little bit by industry, but about 15% higher than if you are a part-time worker. The second thing, you get access to the bonus that companies are paying. And as you know, nenshu, on the annual income side, the bonus is about 35%. So number one, the income goes up by about 50%. The second thing that happens is that as a hiseisha, as a part-time worker, love or money does not buy you credit. You have no access to a mortgage. Once you become a full-time employee, you become eligible for you become eligible for a mortgage, and a credit cycle, a leverage cycle, actually becomes possible. So income growth of 50%. In my analysis, we will find by the time of the Tokyo Olympics that the hiseisha, that the non-part-time, the non-full-time workers are going to be back down to below 30% of the total workforce. That's where it gets a domestic demand cycle. That's where it gets demand for homes, demand for housing, and an endogenous, a jiritsteki domestic self-sustaining recovery. And you, in the real estate business, are exactly at the forefront of this positive dynamics now beginning to come through. Now, I mentioned that there are 2+1 reasons of the difference between the part and the full-time worker: income, credit. What's the third reason? The third reason is Japanese people are very smart. They're very pragmatic. As a part-time worker, you can get a date, but you will never be able to get married. Once you become a full-time worker, she will say yes. So I predict that we're going to see a pickup in weddings, and when weddings go up, when marriage goes up, you will find that sooner or later, typically about 9 months later, the babies are going to start to come through. So this population dynamics, in my opinion, is going to be turning around as well. I want to leave it here. I think we've got time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. また後でなんか時間があったら、ぜひ声かけていただいて、赤ちょうちんで行きましょう。ちょっとワイワイで、ちょっと僕は日本語はまあまあということなんで、でもやっぱりちょっとお酒を飲む、やっぱりだんだんペラペラになります。だからぜひいつでも声かけてください。There's time for a couple of questions. Can you stand up and tell me who you are?
Nick Liu. Jesper, thanks very much. As usual, you're probably slightly on the optimistic end of the spectrum.
Modestly. Modestly optimistic.
Just to put that on one side for a second, what do you see as maybe 1 or 2 of the risks to your rosy outlook?
Okay, very important. There's a lot of risks that everybody else talks about, which means that there are no risks. I want to leave you with 2 things that I worry about. One is domestic, the other one is international. On the domestic side, I worry that I am right about the labor market, which means that the labor market will tighten very, very rapidly, and that actually, yes, wages go up, incomes go up, but that also means that costs for companies employing those people are going to be going up. In other words, that margins are going to be squeezed. I cannot have my cake and eat it. If I say that going from part to full-time increases income by 50%, that does mean that labor costs are going to be going up by 50% as well. For listed large companies, I think that is less of a problem than for the shitaoke, for the small and medium-sized companies, for the regional companies. So number 1 worry, cost push inflation as the cost of labor increases faster than productivity. That is the domestic worry. The international worry is about China. And it is not the slowdown. China is slowing down. I expect that the Chinese average growth rate over the next 3 years is going to be below 5%. That's a given, in my opinion. But what I worry about is the policy response. Once the unemployment rate in China starts to go up, the pressure for the Kyosanto, for the Communist Party, to devalue the renminbi is going to be increasing. So my biggest fear is not the slowdown in China. Every Japanese business person who does business with China is already expecting that. My worry is the policy response. And if China devalues the currency, if currency wars come to Asia, that would be very bad news for any risk asset investment. I want to thank you very much. ぜひ声かけていただいて、いつでも喜んで日本の赤ちょうちんに行っても、あるいはたまたま東京にもやっぱりドイツの美味しいビールのバーが結構あると思いますけれども、いつでも紹介します。Thank you very much.